Hello everybody, and welcome to a very special video from Iota Corporation. We are pleased to bring you confirmed information about Death Stranded, Hideo Kojima's new game. And it's all included in the trailer. It's really cool how they managed to stick everything in there so cleanly and perfectly. Anyway, we're going to go through it right now. The first thing that happens is you have a black screen that slowly fades in to text by William Blake from his Auguries of Innocence. Augury is an omen, so this is sort of a precursor to Innocence. To see a world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. Now this is a series of contradictions that are supposedly going together, which means that the game itself is going to be a number of contradictions, a movie plus a video game, interactive and purely visual that you can't interact with, combined into one. Now of course we know that Hideo Kojima has done this before in Metal Gear Solid 4 by having a game which is essentially a long cutscene, but there's more to it than that. For you see, William Blake is the 38th most influential Briton in 2002 BBC's ranking of top 100 Great Britons. Yes, that's right, Great Britons. Now, keep the number 38 in hand because it is going to play a major part. Also note that the letter A is running twice. We will keep this in mind for later on. Following that, we have the scene of a sandy beach. As we zoom along the ground, Sony Interactive Entertainment Presents appears on the screen, and several letters from that begin running. N, A, E, T, R, and S. And if you look closely, you'll notice that the A links up to the R. That will be very important later on, so keep that in mind. We can also see a number of dead crustaceans on the ground, indicating Hideo Kojima's crabbiness and anger with Konami. Created and developed by Kojima Productions, overlays the larger shot of more crabs, further cementing this idea that Hideo Kojima is crabby after being let go by Konami, and he hopes that this game will make up for that. Notice that the letters D, Y, O, and D are running. We will keep this in mind for later on. If you also look closely, you can see a number of very thin black lines running off of all the crabs along the sand. It's very hard to notice, but it is there. This ties into the theme that the sea is the mother of everything, which we will get into later on. Next, the lyrics begin to kick in with faintly as a hand imprint appears in the sand. This hand imprint is roughly the same size as Norman Reedus' real hand on this screen at this very moment. Yes, it is in fact a very small hand. He has a very big problem with that, but don't worry, as long as he doesn't watch this video, there isn't an issue. The hand fills in with water very rapidly, indicating that the water level is very high in this area, which means that either the tide has very recently left this zone, washing up a large number of creatures, or that the water table is very high and this may be a swampy, marshy area. However, since this is a beach, we can probably discount that. In addition, the dark color of the water makes it appear like blood, as if the ocean itself is bleeding. More handprints appear on the ground, and eventually we reach Norman Reedus' buck-naked body to the lyrics of "I'll go," as if he himself is leaving the ocean to head towards the land. Note Norman Reedus' nude appearance. This is both an attempt to indicate that this will be a survival-based game, as Norman Reedus is both naked and therefore vulnerable to the world around him, and that he will have to acquire materials he gets since he has nothing. It also is an attempt to garner a larger female audience, as Norman Reedus is a very attractive hunk of man-meat. We have a slow zoom across his well-rendered body, and we have an image of his handcuffed wrist. One handcuff has been released, but the other one lights up briefly as we see it. He is next to another one of those strange umbilical cord-like things, which does not seem to be attached to him. The handcuff lighting up briefly indicates that Norman Reedus' lingering attachment to something is still shackling him in some way, and that it lighting up has driven him to become awakened after whatever it is that drew him out of the ocean and onto this beach. Next to him you can see a baby, again attached by an umbilical cord. The appearance is that it is attached to him, indicating that it is in fact his child and that he has given birth to this baby in some way. Next to him you can see more handprints, indicating that perhaps he is not alone on this beach. Along his body you can see even more handprints, indicating that perhaps he was carried here, or perhaps he was one of a whole that were all together and then he was separated. Or perhaps just maybe, this is Hideo Kojima referencing Knight Lautrec's armor in the Dark Souls series, who also is being embraced by his armor. The next lyric is head on, which implies that Norman Reedus is going to be facing his problems head on as he moves towards the baby. Soon I'll Come Around follows as the handprints follow around him as if they are a separate being, perhaps coming towards him to also grab at the baby. Perhaps it is him in a parallel universe in which he is a ghost in this universe. Norman Reedus picks up the baby and embraces it with an expression of intense happiness as the lyrics say lost and never found, foreshadowing that the baby will soon disappear like a ghost. Waiting for my words implies that he is waiting for someone to tell him what is going on, much like all of you are waiting for me to explain to you exactly what is going on in Death Stranding, which I'm doing right now. He appears happy as he continues holding the baby, but as the lyrics change to seen but never heard, the baby disappears as if he can see it in the distance, but he cannot hear it next to him anymore. He looks at his body and his hands are covered with the black liquid, which may again be the blood of the ocean, the mother of all life, bleeding onto him with its blood. The lyrics buried underground, implying that perhaps what he seeks is buried in the sand beneath his feet, as bubbling up, the mother of all creation again. On his leg appears the handprints of a baby. Perhaps his child that he was holding has transferred itself into that parallel dimension that the other handprints that we noticed before have come from. Or perhaps that other dimensional Norman Reedus has taken the baby into its dimension and is now leaving with it, leaving this Norman Reedus stranded alone on a beach without his baby. Note that the handprints that he has on his legs disappear very quickly in relation to the ones on the beach. The baby's handprints then continue onwards towards a sea of dead fish, indicating that perhaps, again, the sea is in trouble in some way as it throws up its inhabitants. Norman Reedus stands up and we can see a cross-shaped incision on his stomach. Noting also that he has a lack of a belly button. Perhaps he has been cut off from the mother of all creation, the ocean, indicating that he was not given birth to, but was perhaps created, or that his birth was somehow removed from him. Perhaps also this indicates a cesarean section of some kind, and that the baby was in fact born from him, that umbilical cord we saw attached to it leading to his stomach, which was then cut off, and the baby itself was taken from his body in a very difficult sense, relating back to the story of Adam and Eve, in which Eve was created from Adam's rib in the very first surgery known to mankind, and the cross indicates further Christian links. Norman Reedus walks towards the camera, very casually, as if he doesn't care that we're about to see his junk, but thankfully the camera faces upwards. We have a lingering shot of Norman Reedus observing the scene before him, pausing to take it all in before we are allowed to see what he sees, before a zoom in on his expertly rendered face. The song comes to a crescendo with a screeching noise, and Norman Reedus stares at the camera. Finally, we see what he sees. Behind him, a sea of dead fish, almost as if they are prostrating themselves before him. Before him, more dead sea creatures, all of them thrown out of the ocean. And high in the sky above him, 5 figures, each indicating one of the stages of grief. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. All of them have come to visit him as a result of his intense trauma, having lost his child. I'll Keep Coming indicates that Norman Reedus will continue on towards these figures even as they disappear into the horizon, disappearing from his life so that he has to seek out each of these steps of acceptance in order to overcome his trauma. On the sea below, we can see more clearly now that each of the whales and dolphins and other sea creatures are connected to the ocean with more umbilical cords. And finally, Hideo Kojima appears after I'll Keep Coming, indicating that he will in fact continue making this game despite anything. Notice the letters J, A, M, and E are dripping. Norman Reedus in, with the letters N, I, and N dripping. And finally, Death Stranding. E, A, T, S, T, and I, N, and G. Note that it is very hard to tell whether or not the A, N, and the D are also dripping, which may indicate a sense of ambiguity in exactly the message Hideo Kojima is attempting to portray with this game. And that's everything you need to know about Death Stranding while you wait for it to be released in the year 2035 after the Great Robot Uprising. We hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.